So we will be taking up the writing work, and once we do this, we will be going to Bowers. Quite a bit of other stories also there to add to Bowers. 1, 2 small announcements are there. Actually, whatever assignments you have been submitting to me, last couple of days not much of work or I could take up because there was an omnibus problem. My laptop, my system, my everything got some problem. I think वो शायद season होता है उसका. So, but only a few of the scripts I have already sent to you. Session on question answers. And secondly, you should be submitting your assignments, I think from tomorrow, on a particular place they mention to you in the website. You are not going to send to my email from tomorrow onwards. जो भी अभी तक मिल गए, those I will dispose of. I will evaluate and I will send you back. The rest of the things from tomorrow onwards, you stick to. Let us start off. Diffusionism, general characteristics, and specific variants therein. The heading that you are writing, diffusionism, general characteristics, and specific variants therein. According to the theory of diffusionism, various culture traits and complexes developed at different places, at various times, and through different historical stages, diffuse or spread to the other areas. In anthropological studies, the approach of diffusionism emerged as, right in quotes, an anti-evolutionist, underline that, anti-evolutionist school of thought, rejecting the unilinear sequences, and the concept of psychic unity of mankind, proposed by classical evolutionism. Diffusionists emphasize diffusionists emphasize that, right in quotes, man is basically uninventive and is more given to imitation, unquote. Thus culture growth is largely because of transmission of culture traits through different means of culture contact. Right in the next paragraph. Based on approaches to diffusion and on the nationality of proponents, diffusionism is classified as under. When you come down here, you let me know. If you have written, fine. If you haven't written, you write. There is no harm in rewriting. You are only in the beginning of the course. There will be time when we will make you repeat the things again and again, especially when you go to topics like racial classifications or linguistic elements, etc. We make you draw the pictures on the board, draw again and again on your paper. Like, in the kindergarten, you try learning your alphabet. Pan-Egyptian extreme diffusionists. Second school, as we have called, culture circle school. Third is culture area school. This off chalo. This good off chalo. Can I go? I'm actually eagerly waiting to send you material, but I haven't still got all your details, your lineage, your clan, everything I should know before I start sending you Keep writing, sir. We will start with the first one, British School. Write a side head there, contributions of British diffusionists. Contributions of British diffusionists. Let me remind you here that you have written about W.H.R. Rivers earlier. 3-4 sentences will be a repetition when I am generally giving you about British diffusionism. So don't mind rewriting. Make a note. British diffusionists are titled as extreme diffusionists and extreme anti-evolutionists. Extreme anti-evolutionists by Marvin Harris. They propounded that culture has evolved only in Egypt, from where it spread to all parts of the world. They believed that diffusion of traits from Egypt was due to migration of people for the purpose of trade. Hence they are also called, write in quotes, British migrationists. They are also called British migrationists. Right in the next paragraph. Rivers was the first to introduce a more acceptable and rational concept of diffusionism in anthropology through his article, write in quotes, disappearance of useful arts, and through the book, write in quotes, History of Melanesian Society. He gave the basic postulates. Of diffusionism as, number one, man is primarily uninventive. Secondly, culture spreads through migration and diffusion. Thirdly, in the process of diffusion, some culture traits might disappear or get degenerated. Right in the next paragraph. In his study of Melanesian society, he found disappearance of useful art of canoe making from certain islands. It is here he examined the emergence of concept of specialization of occupation in the simple societies. Through this he challenged a popular belief that occupational specialization is a characteristic feature of societies at the Metal Ages, and those at the level of civilizations. Right in the next paragraph. In his study of Australian Aborigines, he used archaeological studies to examine the five different burial practices in an otherwise homogeneous population. He attributed such a diversity to diffusion of culture traits by migration. Right in the next paragraph. According to Harris, rivers mostly spoke of the nature of diffusion without attempting to propose a formal theory of diffusion. He had done fieldwork on a limited number of culture traits, to come to the above conclusions. His ethnographs, prior to he becoming a diffusionist, right in the brackets, for example, the Toda, bracket close, were much more detailed than the later. I'm reading out if at all you missed it. The ethnographs prior to he becoming a diffusionist, for example, the Toda, were much more detailed than the later. Melanesian and Australian studies were hence part studies with more inquisitiveness regarding issues such as what must have prompted people to travel and to adopt culture traits that were alien to them, and occasionally give up certain useful traits and art forms for accepting the alien culture traits. Diffusionism of rivers. With his fieldwork, presents a different variant within British diffusionism. Write the next one. Smith. William Smith. Smith in his book, write in quotes, in the beginning, hyphen, the origin of civilization. In the beginning, the origin of civilization, 1928, postulated that culture evolved, exceptionally favorable circumstances, unquote, existed existed only in Egypt. According to him, cultural evolution started at about 4000 BC, in the Nile Valley, when, underline this word, natural man of Egypt began to use the natural crop of barley. He presented the following sequence of events. That is the origin of culture in Egypt. Can you see, sir, from the last? Planting and sowing, hydraulic agriculture, pottery, weaving, plow, wheel being discovered, building of cities, institution of law, government, religion, worship of sun, etc. I am increasing further. Institution of law, government, religion, worship of sun. Should I? This one. King personified as God, mummification and megalithic culture. Mummification and megalithic culture. Megaliths, you know. You must have heard of megaliths. The beautiful gravestones, massive, beautiful gravestones. Massive, mega star, atla anamata. Somehow that word mega had prompted me to say something here. But before this, did you finish writing, all of you? There's a small short answer for dictation they have sent to me from the office. They call it an announcement. I am reading out for you. If not available, it can cause an inconvenience to attend classes. SMS details that should be given are: number 1, name of the student; number 2, admission number; number 3, optional name. అంటే ఇంకా డిసైడ్ అవ్వలేదా? టూ మచ్ మాస్టర్. మొత్తం కోర్స్ అయ్యాక డిసైడ్ చేస్తారో ఏమో. But maybe because of this I am not able to get all your information so that I can share. See, the more you delay, the more will be the damage for you. I am not responsible. So, to this number, you will have to send your love message that, see, I am with Anthropology, give your name, admission number, optional. Let us come back to write. That story is pending, we will talk about it. Keep writing. In another book, I hope this is done. In another book, in quotes, The Diffusion of Culture, 1933, Smith gave his theory of diffusion. According to him, culture started radiating from Egypt when Egyptians, for the purpose of a trade, traveled to different parts of the world. In the process, they had spread their culture traits. Take that picture, then I will. Cambodian temples, Mayan pyramids, Japanese pagodas, England, American Indian burials, Balinese temples. I read out for you: Cambodian temples, Mayan pyramids, Japanese pagodas, England, American Indian burials, Balinese temples. So basically this is the picture that shows the comparisons Smith had made. When he had visited Egypt and then he had visited several other places, he could see the similarity in the structures. Any problem? Any problem? Write down. Smith's own travel across the world. Smith's own travel across the world prompted him to find similarities in the structures in the architectural structures at different places, and those in Egypt. The questions such as how Smith could confirm that Egypt alone was the giver of culture remained unanswered. Egypt alone was the giver of culture remained unanswered. Right in the next paragraph. His student Perry supported Smith's theory and carried out fieldwork in Malayan Peninsula, and in Cairo. Okay. In his book, right in quotes, the children of the Sun God, 1923, Perry emphasized that, right in quotes, transmission of culture is always accompanied by degradation, and no art is really enduring. No art is really enduring, unquote. To explain the disappearance and degradation of culture traits, he picked up several material aspects from Mayan and Egyptian civilizations. In different parts of the world, is a proof enough to show that more evolved cultures existed elsewhere even before the emergence of Egypt. And alongside Egyptian civilization, several others were parallelly emerging. Put a stop there. There's one small work that I'm giving you. So far, we have recommended to purchase 2 books, one for thought, one for tribal India. This is the third one that I'm mentioning. Though I think in the market the stocks are still not available in the required numbers, but still there is no hurry. You can take some time to do this work. I am recommending to buy this book I think this is the second time we are talking about couple anthropologists in the class. Previously I was mentioning somebody else? Huh? Dubey. Anthropology by Amber. Sir, whenever you are trying to pick up a book for reading, stick to the topics that I recommend you to read from them. I mean, once you finish them, maybe, out of your own zeal and interest, you can explore more. I don't want you to get into difficulties by trying to pick up certain topics that maybe, that may hinder your progress in the discipline. Sir, in this particular book, you have one topic called Origin of Cities. Origin of Cities. It's a very small topic, Origin of Cities, that runs into about 3 or 4 pages. I am more interested in a chart that is given to you there. Though much more detailed examination of origin of cities, why civilizations, how civilizations must have originated, we will be dealing that in a greater detail when I do with lithic cultures and arrival of civilizations in archaeology. But it is only to have some kind of warm-up for you to deal with these topics and the like. I am asking you to read the topic, the origin of cities, and you look at the table, the graph that is given, where he mentions arrival of different civilizations at different points of time. Some in the New World, some in the Old World. You can see where exactly the Harappan civilization is, whether we were earlier to Egypt or later to Egypt, kind of things. Here there was one major question that was raised against Egyptologists, that is, it is not simply sufficient to see. Actually speaking, there was so much of a difference in the structure. You have to see the functionality of the structures. When he was comparing all of them with the Egyptian pyramids, pyramids are primarily the graves. Whereas the list of others that we have seen, I think among them you have, except for this, American Indian burials, the rest of them, this is general architecture that he is speaking of, Anglican architecture, pagodas, pyramids, temples, most of them are actually temples. You cannot compare a temple with a grave. It's a different story. It's altogether a different story that when it comes to India, most of our revenue, tourism revenue is from the graves only. Of course, we do have temples, but we love to visit graves rather than temples mostly. Temples can have a lesser choice, but graves, every one of us would want to go. It's a rarity to find people who say that, no, I hate to see Taj Mahal. But at least once in a lifetime, because it is given that kind of a market, hype that is created, at least once in the lifetime you would want to visit. Any other graves that you have seen? Taj Mahal to ho gaya, dekh liye. Humayun's tomb and Qutub Shahi tombs nearby. 7 tombs are there, 6 in a dilapidated state. 1, they have made it so that they can take movies and pictures there. And Tipu Sultan, Ajmer. Aur bataiye, I am looking for one particular answer. Gol Gumbad or? Haan ji sir? Only Alagudu District, NTR Garden. Why we should take pride only in the Shah Jahan and other Mughal kings' graves? Why not our own Telugu fellow's grave out there? You will have to have that kind of a pride and ethnocentrism towards your own graves. I don't know if at all you had seen this or not. Sikandra is my favorite grave. Akbar's grave is the most awesome one that I have seen. Primarily because that shows the grandeur. If somebody says that he was the Shahanshah of India, of Hindustan, his grave speaks of the magnificence there. You can see that hundreds of acres of land that is there for one single grave. We find it very difficult to get the 6 feet land in the graveyards here. I think it is time you will have to find out the cost of land in the graveyards. Because when real estate is booming and prices are increasing, most possible that in the graves also prices are increasing. Sir, whether you have built your own house while you are alive or not, after your death you will definitely be needing that land. And I think the day will soon come where we will have to make our future purchases and future bookings for our sites in the graves. And they also should meet the Vastu requirements, eastern side and then airy one, so that whenever you want you can come out, sit then, take a kind of burn bodies, but then you will have, in several sects you have a proper grave also. A bit of the other things that are left out, थोड़ा तो आप निकाल लोगे घर में रखने के लिए, थोड़ा आप निकाल लोगे गंगा में बहाने के लिए, और थोड़ा अपना तावीज़ बन के रख लें, kind of a thing, और बाकी जो भी है वो उसमें डालकर आप anyway grave बनाते हो, so that when you want to talk to your Pitri Devatas, where will you go? Because we are idolaters. We have to have some place where we know that, okay, my grandfather's grave is there. I can go sit there and relax, kind of a thing. I love to talk about this. A very beautiful, interesting thing. Because I know you're writing too much. एक बहुत ही personal story है, but then I love talking about this. Anybody from Chennai here? Chennai? No, I won't ask any questions about Chennai. If at all you had been to Chennai, there's one place called Thousand Lights area, where we have a huge mosque, and then there's a attached graveyard. Many big mosques come with an attached graveyard. Just attached toilet ho gaya, attached graveyard. So there's one place where you give sacred bath to the dead body, and then you do your prayer in the mosque, and immediately aap udhar dafan kar diya. I love this place because I have an aunt who is married into a Maulvi's family, Maulvi's family, and their house is more or less in the graveyard. I mean, the house is there, the outer wall is actually a boundary to the graveyard. Now, many societies, particularly the Hindu society, many others for that matter, we don't venture into such kind of residences that are sharing a boundary line with the graveyard. अब ये मजेदार बात होती है कि every day in and day out, little fellows keep on throwing their toys in the graveyard, क्योंकि उनकी खिड़की तो उधर ही खुलती है. And then every time they are running into the graveyard, picking up, somebody is calling them, इधर है देख लो. No, from a grave some noise comes, some sound comes, इधर है ले लो बच्चे, जाते हैं उठाते हैं. And then it's a very common statement in the household when we call, बच्चे क्या करें, खबरस्तान में खेल रहे. I mean, it's like Khabristan is a part of life. For many of us, we actually feel afraid of talking about graves and kind of things. वहाँ तो लड़के बैठकर खेल रहे, उसके ऊपर कभी कभी खोद दिया, किसी का हाथ निकल गया, kind of a thing. But it's a very casual thing. कभी आपको मौका मिलता है तो when you go to Chennai, you try to visit. Now I'll also give her address. She will give you all the details of the graveyard, कौन कहाँ दफन है, kind of a thing. Make a note, sir. You are writing criticism conclusion about British diffusion. German-Austrian school, continue writing in the criticism of British school. German-Austrian school criticized Egyptologists for failing to appreciate parallel emergence of cultures across the globe. Keep writing in bullet points. For Marvin Harris, Egyptologists took into account only simple form of diffusion. Simple form of diffusion. Never emphasizing diffusion of culture complexes. You understand this statement, I hope. Never emphasizing diffusion of culture complexes. They ignored diffusion of non-material aspects of culture. Diffusion of non-material aspects of culture. And restricting their stories to the material elements, they could study from megalithic evidences. Right, to the next point. In offering proof of diffusion, they did not take into account the functions of culture traits, and cultural meaning of the traits. We will be writing about German-Austrian school, but before that, why should we study graves? It has been a very fascinating thing. Day in and day out, you keep getting something in the newspapers that so-and-so graves are unearthed. And they provided us with certain evidences that must have revolutionized what we actually thought of earlier. In fact, we have. I'm not simply talking about somebody's grave, like a person belonging to say Neanderthal time or Homo erectus time. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Homo sapiens, the modern man. And when you find graves of say about 4,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, as our friend was making a mention, one could be the material culture or maybe technological stage where they are. If somebody was wearing iron ornaments, not gold or other precious ornaments, maybe because they didn't know the precious metal then. Or you find two graves, one next to each other or in the same region, but one is having the precious metal, the other is not having, other is mostly wearing iron or things like that. Maybe that shows that there is a gradation in the society, stratification in the society. Maybe they are slaves and hence they are wearing iron, and these people. Graves are not simply wealth of information. They actually have in store a lot of stories to talk about. Or for that matter, we stick to still Taj Mahal there. If a diffusionist has to study Taj Mahal, he would first start with the material that is used there, that is marble. When it is foreign to the region, he tries to examine how is it that the foreign material had come to them. Many stories that speak of Egyptian pyramids, they actually have this orientation. You must have seen several documentaries about the Egyptian pyramids, where from they must have got such kind of a stone. and at a technologically such a primitive stage, how was it possible for them to construct such a very systematic way of erecting the stones with such an intricate detail there, and such a detailed similarity, one pyramid being so very similar to the other, such symmetric structures? How was it possible? I mean, this is one very interesting thing that we are going to study in the future. The German diffusionists rejected the idea that Egypt is the only center of civilization. Egypt is the only center of civilization. They believed that, right in quotes, culture traits developed independently at several places. Culture traits developed independently at several places and migrated to or imitated at other places involves a complex process of diffusion. Involves a complex process of diffusion. They considered both evolution and diffusion as necessary concepts to study progress and change of culture groups. Each culture has a place of origin, called culture circle, from where the culture diffuses to the other areas. German diffusionists tried to identify these culture circles. They believed that migration of a trait can be understood through the study of historical data. They found it necessary to track the movement of culture traits from one place to the other. Due to the significance given to study of history of culture traits, they are called culture historic school. They are called culture historic school. Of the German thinkers, Ratzel and Frobenius gave the principles of diffusion that were used by Graebner and Schmidt, in the reconstruction of culture circles. Ratzel was the first to introduce the idea of diffusion in German school through his book, you can see the name there, Anthropologia. Through his book, Anthropologia, Geographia, Anthropologia, 1899, which emphasized that, right in quotes, people were more influenced by one another rather than geographical factors, unquote. It is here he reviewed the popular belief of geographical determinism. Continue writing there. Though Ratzel agreed that geography has an unquestioning impact on the cultures of inhabitants, through mechanisms of cultural diffusion, it can be found that contact with the neighbors can change the culture of a group which has to be otherwise different. I'll give you one simple example for this. It means that the more physically closer you are with certain other groups, the more you change. If you start staying with people of different culture, due to their long stay, due to the long contact that you establish with them, the nature of your culture might change. One simple example is the Muslims of Arabia are very much different from Muslims in India or elsewhere. If you see in that particular region, geography must have determined certain characteristics. They started having particular type of cultural styles. But then, once the community has started living here, because of the long stay, sir, you will have to understand here, faith is different from culture. Faith is something that you are establishing with the supernatural. And because of faith, your living style must be, your faith might be giving a directive that you should be living in this particular way. But then when it comes down to how you are actually steering in your day-to-day life, that has more to do with the people among whom you are living. You may not be having the same kind of a cuisine that people out there might be having. Maybe that a few things might be continuing, whatever, but then more or less, because the kind of food that is available here, your cuisine might get altered. Or sticking to that kind of a cuisine might become a restricted affair. There is one place in the old city of Hyderabad called Irani Gali. Those of you who have been inhabiting Hyderabad for a long time, especially the old city, you might be knowing this. In the Irani Gali, as the name suggests, there's a lot of Iranian population. Especially in the times of Muharram, people from the other parts of the city, they try to go there, attend the kind of religious ceremonies, etc. You are offered a lunch or a dinner where you will have to share the table with others. Sharing table is not simply I eat my own food and you eat your own food. It's not that way. You have a huge thali where 8 of the people simultaneously eat from the same thing. So you will have to be really agile and really up to the mark in grabbing the stuff. Because ऐसा होता है कि all of them start together, all of them have to leave together. ऐसा नहीं कि आप jolly good अपने speed से खा रहे हो, ना आपको कुछ बचा भी नहीं होगा. That's the first thing. And secondly, that we will be talking about people from different parts of India also, how the cuisines are, how the eating styles have to be when you are invited there. It's like when a Chinese fellow invites you home on a cup of tea. How is it that you will have to consume the cup of tea? ऐसा नहीं कि आपको अच्छा लगा तो आपने जल्दी जल्दी खत्म कर दिया और लगा दिया. The expectation is that you will have to take smaller sips at a slower pace. He also understands that you will have to be served. You will have to be served continuously, and they have this practice that they serve in very small cups. जैसा वो शॉर्ट्स वाले छोटे छोटे cups. You understand that very well if I say that. As you are emptying, he will go on pouring. It shows that his affection is endless. Just in case he doesn't like you, he would have that lassi wala bada sa glass, and then he will pour the whole thing. He would hand it over to you. Now my duty is done. You finish and you go. There's no more. So actually speaking, there's so many cultural variants that might be continuing here and there. Maybe the kind of worshipping pattern is there. But when it boils down to the regular affairs in life, they must have got altered so much. Otherwise, if you go and see in the Arabia, you don't have the practice of something like a tali, something like a black beads, because it is more a cultural thing. Once you are exposed to the culture here, you start imitating, emulating the people nearby. That is the meaning when Ratzel says, occasionally geography is a lesser significant one. The more you start staying in a particular locality, the more is the change that comes in your cultural aspects. Now come down to the next one. In his book, History of Mankind, continue writing there. In his book, History of Mankind, Ratzel gave the following principles of diffusion. The following principles of diffusion. Number 1, man is mostly an imitator rather than inventor. Man is mostly an imitator rather than an inventor. Secondly, single culture traits are usually diffused while the complete culture complexes are transplanted by migration. Continue writing there. In both the cases, adaptation to environment will bring changes in the culture traits and in culture complexes. Thirdly, the principle of criteria of a form, that is, if unessential culture traits are similar, it indicates diffusion. If unessential culture traits are similar, it indicates diffusion. For example, being coastal populations possessing canoes, C-A-N-O-E-S, possessing canoes does not confirm diffusion. But similarity in the blades or the shapes and sizes of canoes, art engravings and usage of particular colors indicates diffusion. Because these aspects are only related to ornamentation and do not affect and do not affect the functionality. The functionality. Fourthly, origin and end point of culture, origin and end point of culture trait must be identified to prove cultural diffusion. To prove cultural diffusion. Ratzel applied these principles in identifying diffusion of material culture traits in, number one, spread of Buddhism from India to Mongolia. Spread of Buddhism from India to Mongolia through the study of Buddhist religious symbols, such as lotus. Secondly, study of bow and arrow culture that had diffused from Indonesia to Africa. Come to the next one. Frobenius. Leo Frobenius. Who was a student of Ratzel, gave the principle of geographical statistics or criteria of quantity. According to it, more or the number of similar traits, more is the possibility that diffusion has occurred. According to him, when culture traits are emulated, they are subject to ecological adaptation. His list of culture traits included both material and non-material cultures. Unlike Ratzel, who mostly depended on Study of material culture. Study of material culture. Certain interesting elements such as myths and folk tales were used by him to confirm cultural diffusion across continents. Right in the next paragraph. Graebener, by using the principles of criteria for quantity and criteria of quality, gave the concept of culture circle in his book, you can see on the board. Translated into English as Methods of Ethnology. That was a German title. Methods of Ethnology, 1911. He introduced the concept of primeval cultures. He introduced the concept of primeval cultures, which meant that they are the earliest cultures that must have evolved in small isolated populations living at band level of political institutions. Band level of political institutions. B-A-N-D, sir, not B-A-double-N-D. B-A-double-N-E-D, that's not the spelling. This is the band. Now we will talk about this for a while and come back to right. The statement is, primeval cultures are those cultures that must have, that are the earliest ones and must have emerged among the small isolated societies that are at the band level of political institutions. Now go back to see Morgan's evolution chart. In that table, my God, इतना खोज रहे हो. That is the reason why I asked you to start writing index. अभी तो खैर 4-5 पन्ने ही लिखे होंगे ना? Your digging has started. If you see the evolution chart there in political institutions or political organizations, there is a mention that from band or horde level the societies or cultures moved to tribal level, and from the tribal level they moved on to chiefdoms or state. I would want to have a small talk about this. First, we will be writing the definition of band. You write somewhere else, it is not in the regular dictation. Generally, I ask the student to write in the footnote or in the right side margin. Footnote, jahan niche likhte hain. Many times, footnotes are much longer than the original notes. If you refer to certain books, they have a lot of footnotes and very less information at the top. Write the definition of band. It is the earliest social institution wherein the members are from close kin groups, and practice foraging, F-O-R-A-G-I-N-G, foraging as their basic economic occupation. Practice foraging as the basic economic occupation and are generally nomadic. I repeat, band is an earliest social organization wherein the members are from close kin groups and practice foraging as a basic economic occupation and are generally nomadic. I'm still coming there. Don't worry. I don't leave any unexplained word and leave the class. It's a group of people. Band is a group of people that have very close kinship ties. And it is not simply the kinship-based organization, it is that organization which is at the earliest level of economic subsistence that is nothing but hunting and gathering. Foraging is a fanciful word. Foragers are the people who are food collectors. Earliest foragers are hunter-gatherers. So these practice hunting-gathering, and they live in small groups that are constantly moving. They are moving either in search of food or they are moving according to a particular pattern. They might be, every band has a particular region within which, a particular geographical region within which they will have to collect their food. They will have to go for hunting and gathering. And these are the people, generally, I'll give you this example. You have Kung Bushmen. Kung Bushmen is a big tribe. But then they are mostly functional at the band level. So if that is the region of the Kung Bushmen, each band has got its own specific territory. So there is band 1, band 2, band 3, etc. They have their own geographical territories within which they would be roaming around. They are foragers. Foragers meaning they travel, they collect food. When he looks at a band, they actually try to move around in that place based on the availability of food. He doesn't simply stop there. Band is not like a group with specific numbers alone. See, it is like suppose you have less availability of food, the band may get split up, and then maybe 50, 100 people might be living together. Others might try to gather food together. So the band size may vary according to seasons, according to availability of food. If there is more of availability of food, they don't even mind taking people from the neighboring bands. Because they are not having food, we have the food. It's not like, see, it is our region, it is so very sacrosanct that we are not supposed to cross the border. It is not that way. Water wars is a modern phenomenon. It's not for them. If the neighboring band is facing a water crisis, they don't mind calling them there, share their holes of water. So band is that population that lives on hunting gathering. They have a specific territory within which they move around. The size of the band is not strictly followed. Based on the availability of food, the size of the band shrinks or increases. This is the first level. But then as we go into the later things, now what Graebner says is, earliest cultures, he calls them primeval cultures, primeval or unadulterated. These are the unadulterated cultures, original cultures. They are actually the ones that are taking birth in isolated regions that are there at the band level. So when I say band level, this is the earliest ones. The cultures of the earliest populations, they are called primeval cultures. So keep writing. According to Graebner, cultures started originating at the earliest stages of human cultural evolution. In Oceania region, he identified 6 culture circles or primeval culture circles. Described in his book, Ethnology. That is the spelling of the book. And those are the culture circles. Said those of you who were not there in those classes, we are speaking of cultural diffusion. One group said that from Egypt everything originated and spread. The second group said that no, it is not Egypt, it is from different places in the world. But then their research was in Oceania. Within Oceania, they identified 6 specific culture circles. According to him, it is from these regions from where cultures had first originated and spread. That is the nomenclature given by him. First you take down the nomenclature, we will have a small talk about them. 6, number 1 is Tasmanian culture circle. Second one is Old Australian culture circle. Thirdly, Totemic hunter culture circle. We don't know what is totem so far, but still we are forced to write. Moiety complex culture circle. Moieties we know. Moiety is defined as half of a tribe. Moiety complex culture circle. Melanesian bow culture circle. Polynesian patrilineal culture circle. What he is telling is, in Oceania, there are 6 primeval culture circles where the earliest cultures have originated. From here, the cultures have spread to the rest of the world, rest of the regions. Now, if he was saying this, we try to get an idea that maybe when he says these are the earliest culture circles, most probably all of them were coexisting, emerging simultaneously. Because he was not really happy when Egyptologists were saying that Egypt was the first one from where everybody was getting. His criticism was, no, it is not Egypt. Every region or many of the regions are contributing to cultures. When you say that many of the regions are contributing, most probably it is that simultaneous evolution was happening, simultaneous emergence of cultures was happening. But one significant statement that he makes was that these I am arranging in a chronology. Don't worry what is there inside and what are the names there. Some 6 names he is giving. Right now you consider them as some ABC cultures he is giving. In these 6 culture circles, he says, I am arranging them in a chronology, meaning that the Tasmanian culture circle is the earliest one to come and this was the latest one to come. When he is mentioning this, he doesn't even stop there. He says, there has been a cultural diffusion from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. The problem is, when you are trying to arrange them in a chronology, and you say that there is a diffusion from one to the other, is it that you are saying that at one point of time, Tasmania was there? In the later culture, whatever Tasmanian characteristics are there, they are flowing as something like a previous culture to this one, if you could recall, evolution is from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 when you are getting. Is it that fashion in which you are organizing? Or is it that maybe one culture, you have organized already, you are saying that they are there in a chronology. Tasmanian culture circle might be having its own next stage. And from that next stage, they are getting. Are you following what I'm saying? These are the things that are not clearly explained by him. I go back. Egyptologists were focusing on only one point. He said that, no, it is not one point, there are many. People were thinking that maybe Graebner and Schmidt are going to give us, or the German Austrians are going to give us points from where cultures must have originated throughout the world, maybe from North America, maybe from Asia, maybe from Africa, from different places they are going to identify cultures. That's not happening. They were glued to Oceania. Within Oceania, they are trying to identify. So this is something like a outside Oceania. They are presenting as if Oceania is a center of emergence of cultures. Right now you don't bother about this. Looking at these names, when somebody is getting bogged up, the next one is all the more venomous, I must say. At one point of time, UPSC was asking questions such as, present Schmidt's diffusionistic scheme. Once you have finished writing this, just relax, look at what Schmidt had to say. This person was trying to identify 6 culture circles. He says these are the primeval culture circles from where cultures are originating and emerging. But one mistake that he makes is I am organizing them in a chronological order. This was the earliest one, this is the latest one. People immediately started criticizing that maybe you are writing an evolutionary picture, not a diffusionary picture. Sometimes what happens is one step in a wrong direction will change the entire route. Schmidt continued with that. Schmidt says, okay, when you are showing 6, I will show something else. Different kinds of nomenclature comes. Don't write anything as of now, just look at it. He says there are 4 major culture circles. One is called primeval, you understand the meaning of it, primeval or the earliest one. Second to come were primary culture circles. Then came secondary culture circles. Then came tertiary culture circles. I go back. We are talking about what Schmidt had given as his scheme of culture circles. Now, it is not simply primeval culture circles, but he uses the other terminology, primary, secondary, and tertiary. They are also arranged in a chronology only. Primeval were the earliest ones. Primary was the second to emerge in history. Secondary were next to come. Tertiary were next to come. He doesn't stop there. Pichi baga parakashtaga jerite. So it's like wheels within wheels. Within each primary culture circle, primeval culture circle, there are 3 others. And then you go to the next one. You have the other titles there. Now, according to him, there are 4 major culture circles. These are the 4 major culture circles. Within each of them, there are subculture circles. There might be a few there. Or maybe that they are also intersecting. Now, he is giving an intersecting culture circles because he says that one is getting from the other. This is diffusing certain things, and that is diffusing certain things. Few you are giving there, few you are getting from here. So this, what we say, give and take is a phenomena that goes on between all the 4 culture circles. Mind it, he has said that these 4 are coming one after the other. Now, one big question is, if one is coming one after the other, they are coming one after the other, how is it possible that you are getting from the one that has come earlier? It may happen in 2 ways. One may be that the first one is continuing to exist and hence you are able to get it from there. Or maybe that the previous one is your ancestor and hence you are getting. There is no clarity about it. But then for the sake of exam, I don't know sometimes why a question is asked actually. Sometimes a question about a thinker is asked not because this theory is important. It may be because his other contributions are important and hence he is being asked. And sir, in the exam, we tell the students, there are certain questions which are a should and must to answer. There are certain questions which you should not touch. Schmidt is somebody whom you should not touch. Unless otherwise, it becomes very mandatory for you. Then you try to give a brief idea about what is the diffusionistic concept that he is giving. You say that, see, this is the chart that he mentioned. But just look at the examples for that matter. Right now, there are so many new words coming up. I think exogamy is one word that we will have to discuss. But then I am reading out. Within the primeval culture circles, he gives 3 subculture circles. Central or exogamous crisis circle, which has certain characteristics. Interestingly, he gives characteristics also. They have exogamous hordes, monogamous families. If I'm just looking at that, exogamous horde and monogamous family, go to Morgan's chart. He mentions hordes and bands at the bottom. And if you look at the marriage type there, primitive promiscuity, we are getting monogamy much later. If I am following Morgan's evolution or general evolutionary sequences that are mostly accepted by people, monogamy seems to be the one that must have come much later, but you are mentioning them at the earliest stage itself. So we are not looking for proofs there. Even if I am not looking at the proofs, for a general understanding also that looks to be slightly uncomfortable. Or if you move further, Arctic Crees and Eskimo, okay, I try to take it as an example, but Antarctic Crees and Bushmen as an example, you will have to look at the geographical location of the people at least. So when he is giving examples, it is not matching with the geography where he is trying to mention. Maybe those are the cardinal errors that he is making. So for the moment, you don't try to go into the nitty-gritties of them. We will try to take the scheme as given by him and preserve it. If at all time permits, we can try memorizing it for the sake of reproducing in the exam. I give it a last preference to be written in the exam because logic doesn't go with it. Memorizing with logic, this is understandable. When we say that, for example, in archaeology, I give some logic. See, this is what is the flow of things. You follow this flow of things and you fit the examples. So you know the logic, you are trying to give certain examples that goes well with the memorizing. But here, that is not really good. But then there is no other go. Unfortunately, occasionally in this subject, what happens is we are forced to learn and memorize things which look to be very unfortunate, very illogical. But we will have to accept. So we will continue from Graebner. Write down. Graebner's primeval culture circles. Graebner's primeval culture circles are organized in a chronology. So don't curse me for this. I am not responsible for this. Sometimes whatever the thinker says, however illogical, meaningless it is, I am supposed to communicate to you. That is my duty I am doing. Wherever possible, I am trying to explain things to you, present it in a juicy way. But where it is not possible, you don't blame it on me. It is the subject. No? Yeah, right on. Graebner's primeval culture circles are organized in a chronology with Tasmanian culture circle being the oldest, and Polynesian patrilineal culture as the most recent. According to Graebner, the influence of primeval culture circles began to radiate with the development of means of transport. Right in the next paragraph. Schmidt, that is the spelling, if at all you haven't come across the name so far. Schmidt gave a similar scheme of diffusion with 4 major culture circles with several subculture circles. Unlike Graebner, he tried to present characteristics of each culture circle. What is exogamy? Finding partner from outside. So somewhere you can scribble in the footnote the two terms, exogamy and endogamy. Right in the footnote somewhere. Exogamy is a principle that directs the members of a culture group to find mates from outside one's own culturally defined group. Is that okay? Exogamy is a practice, is a rule under which members of a culture group are directed to find mates from outside one's own culturally defined group. Secondly, endogamy. Endogamy. Individual shall find mates. Individuals shall find mates from within one's own culturally defined group. Can you give me an example for an endogamous group? Endogamy is you will have to find mate from within your own culturally defined group. From within your own culturally defined group. I repeat my question. Can you give me an example for that culturally defined group which can be seen for endogamy? I have heard you. When I am not responding, it means that something discomforting is there. I repeat. Endogamy is within your own group you will have to marry. What is this group? Can you give example for this group? Caste is an endogamous group. Within your own caste you will have to marry. Any such other group within which you are supposed to marry? Family లోపల చేసుకుంటావా? Gotra is exogamous, sir. You are not going to marry a person from the same Gotra. She is your sister, master, please. Gotra is an exogamous group. You are not supposed to marry within your Gotra. Gotra or clan is an example for exogamy. Caste is an example for endogamy. Any other endogamous groups? Sometimes religion, sometimes region, sometimes village, or sometimes a race. That could be a endogamous group. Exogamous group may be a lineage, a clan. You're not supposed to marry within your own lineage. You're not supposed to marry within your own clan. Within your own family sometimes, nuclear family especially, you're not supposed to marry from within your own nuclear family. Or for that matter, in certain communities, in certain regions, villages, or exogamous groups, you're not supposed to marry from within your own village. Because maybe you are being brought up together within the same region, within the same village. You know each other so well. There's a natural disinterest, of course. Interestingly, I'll give you one name here. Then you can start writing. This is a name of an anthropologist, Westermarck. Some of you must have heard this. If at all you studied sociology in your school, college. He gave a very interesting statement. Familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds contempt. You're not really attracted towards the familiar things. So village exogamy, later you must have made a rule. But there is a natural behavioral trait that something that is familiar to you, you're not interested. Your wife, you are very much familiar, you're not interested. Neighbor's wife, you are very much interested. Familiarity breeds contempt. Sir, I want to give here a very interesting example, a very interesting study given by Westermarck. Then I'll take you forth to Schmidt. I had to do this, I forced to do this. Because I know where the class is moving in, kind of. I don't want people to be gloomy. There is one society that Westermarck studied in Sri Lanka called Vedda. V-E-D-D-A. Vedda is a tribe in Sri Lanka. So he actually gives this statement in some other context, which we keep on examining later. But there's one other study that he makes called in the Society of Vedda. I was actually reading in today's newspaper about some couple, lovers committing suicide because the girl's brother had seen them, something like that. So that reminded me of this study. Taking this very example, I was asked to write big so that people there can see. You know him? You know this? They are brother and sister. This is okay. There's no problem with that. But suppose I draw this. This is now used as a symbol for unmarried cohabitation. Because as the society changes, we will have to come up with symbols to communicate things. So suppose the same situation occurs. Brother sees them being intimate. Then being a brother, what will you do? Being a brother, what will you do? Force them to marry? First you get married, जो भी करना है बाद में कर लेना. This is one way. And what else? No, she says that no, this is not right. Maybe you will beat him up. Knowing fully well that she is also equally responsible. Or maybe you understand that you beat both of them and segregate them. The more you segregate, the more. That's why he was very much futuristic. When he says that, no, you first get married, I don't want to get into all kinds of nonsense. Killing and all kinds of things, I think, have come of age. No? Interestingly, one of the students, young fellows, when I was asking this question, he was saying, that's her life, her business, what do I have to do? Looks to be more functional, more up to date. He is much younger to all you guys, also appearing at the exam. So when I think these are the days when in each year generations are changing. What a fellow of the last year was thinking, he will not be. 1 year of elderness also is changing the whole thinking process. These are the people Westermarck was mentioning, Veddas. If he sees unmarried sister being intimate with somebody, all three have to commit suicide. Something that one cannot imagine actually. Had it been a very contemporary society and this brother sees them, because you will have to commit suicide, he would act as if he hadn't seen anything. They are also, like Oscar winners, they would also feel, kind of. Vedda have another interesting practice. In order to see to it that brother and sister attraction has to be tackled, they are actually brought up into different compartments in the village. They don't live in the same household. Household is the house where you actually live together, where you grow up. Brother and sister are not grown up together there. This is called one type of an avoidance. Avoidance, you understand? You avoid sometimes the people. क्यों अवॉइड कर रहे, फोन भी नहीं उठा रहे हो. Even if you are talking, you are not having the same kind of intimacy, your voice is different. No? Then you say, nahi, UPSC anthropology class se dimag kha raha hai. Sir, one life tip here. Life tips. No? Somehow there is an unnecessary puzzle created there. Marriage, pata nahi kya hoga. What must be there exotic inside? There's nothing there. This is an unnecessary puzzle that is created, unnecessary curiosity that is created, thinking that, married people already know this. But still one interesting question, na? जब तुमको इतना पता है तो why do you drive people to get married? అదేదో సినిమాలో చాక్లెట్లు ఇస్తుంటాడు చూడండి, నువ్వు చాక్లెట్ తీసుకున్నావు మరి నువ్వు చెప్పొచ్చు కదా, నువ్వు చెప్పవు, తీసుకొని ఈ చాక్లెట్ ఏముంది, చాక్లెట్ తీసుకుని పక్క రూమ్లోకి వెళ్తాడు, వెళ్తే తెలుస్తుంది కదా. So, those of you who do not know Telugu, I can't help it. You will have to take the help of your neighbor. We are establishing our credentials, our precedences with movies like Bahubali. I was reading a lot of reviews where people are saying that we are learning Telugu now. आपको भी सीखना ही है, because you will have to understand what I am speaking in the class. Understand this. This is a very interesting kinship behavior, that is avoidance, studied by Westermark, brother-sister avoidance. Because in order to avoid any kind of untoward incident between brother and sister, they are actually brought up in two different compartments. इतने बाद भी ये होता है, so they will have to commit suicide. We are going to see several other kinds of avoidances in our classes. Sometimes father-in-law, daughter-in-law avoidance also is very much important. In certain societies, there is a father-in-law, daughter-in-law avoidance. You know what kind of fellow he is. And hence you will have to take proper care of yourself, maintain distance, don't go unnecessarily in front of him. अब हर चीज़ के लिए इतना सर्विस करने की ज़रूरत नहीं. Every time you need not have to go to him, keep on serving. One fine day your husband will start avoiding you because you are serving so much the father-in-law. We are going to see several interesting kind of things there. These are all life tips, sir. I didn't do anything, anthropologists have done all those studies. अब ये लिख लीजिएगा, Schmidt's culture circles. You just keep on taking them down one after the other. Four culture circles: primeval, primary, secondary, tertiary. Can I go? Primeval culture circle, within which three sub-culture circles are there: exogamous Crees, Arctic Crees, Antarctic Crees. Three examples that are given there. Pygmies. Crees is circle. Can I go? Example, Bushman. Exogamous with sex totems. Don't worry about the terminology, we will be talking about them. Whatever terms that we are not able to understand today, we will be talking about them in the first half hour tomorrow, especially the term totem. Example is Bushman. Primary culture circle. Primary culture circle, there are three sub-culture circles there. Primary culture circle, I am dictating so that I can go fast. Primary culture circle, number one, patriarchal, cattle rearing, patriarchal cattle rearing culture circle. Secondly, exogamous patrilineal totemic higher hunters, totemic higher hunters. Thirdly, exogamous matrilineal village dwelling horticulturists, horticulturists. Third one, secondary culture circle, secondary culture circle. Two subcircles there. Number one, free patrilineal system. He never explains what is free. Free patrilineal system. Free patrilineal system. Examples, Polynesia and India. Secondly, free matrilineal system. Free matrilineal system. For example, southern China and Melanesia. Fourthly, tertiary culture circle. Tertiary culture circle. Right under that. They represent higher civilizations of Asia, Europe and America. Continue writing. Graebner and Schmidt. Empirical examples. Relevant empirical examples. They could not explain questions of diffusion such as why culture traits are accepted or rejected in the process of diffusion. In contemporary anthropology, the culture circle schemes given by Graebner and Schmidt are not accepted but the principles given by Ratzel and Frobenius are still considered respectfully. The concept of culture circle was used by American diffusionism in the development of culture area concept. write one last statement there. According to Marvin Harris, the diffusionistic school in general, and culture circle school in particular, can be called the most infertile schools of cultural study in anthropology. Those are the two names, sir. I would try to recall for you American diffusionism. It is also called culture area school, with a small modification here and there of the concept of culture circle. They have given this. To recall one significant thing here, what they said was that the boundaries are not really circular, they may be amorphous boundaries. They were concepts such as culture center as used by Whistler, culture climate, geographical regions where you find a larger density of certain culture traits. There is a homogeneity of culture traits, but this homogeneity, as you go to the margins or the boundary, it goes on reducing. So far it is good, but then there is one negative element we found out. Whistler said that we will have to first identify the culture traits that can be considered to draw the culture area. He started with what is called food consumption as the culture trait to identify the culture area. So what he believed was that if you are consuming the similar kind of food, you might be having the similar culture. That's where there was a big mistake. And then Kroeber comes up. He started giving the list of culture traits within the same geographical area where Whistler was trying to draw the culture areas. But the underlying theme is one and the same. It is not Egypt alone, not Oceania alone. From different parts of the world, cultures have emerged. But their research were mostly Northern American region. It's as if from North America entire culture was evolving. But then for American diffusionists, where from cultures are emerging is less significant. They were mostly bothered about spread of cultures. Whether the culture has emerged in Egypt or Oceania, that is not important for us. What is important for us is cultures are diffusing. When they are diffusing, sometimes the receiver is not accepting. Sometimes they are accepting a culture trait. It's like I am giving you anthropology. Some of you are accepting. Some of you say that we don't want, thank you. Why is it that some people are accepting? Why some people are not accepting? There's one very interesting concept they give. It is called age area principle. Now, I repeat what I said. They wanted to study mostly the process of diffusion, less about evolution. But their research was mostly in North American region. They were actually not trying to establish that cultures have evolved here, but cultures are spreading from here. In the process, they have devised this one kind of a technique which was a flaw, which was criticized. But here there is one interesting principle they were giving. When you look at the cultures globally, they believed that if a culture trait is the older one, it will have more geographical spread. Older is the culture trait, more will be the spread. Understand this very closely. age area principle as given by American diffusionists was that older the culture trait, more will be the spread, meaning more will be the acceptance. Can you give me an example? Older the culture trait, more is the spread. Koncham marchand. Hinduism, compare it to? Okay, when you are looking at India for that matter, not globally for that matter, in India, Hinduism has larger spread when compared to Buddhism or Islam or Christianity, because if I am applying this principle there, Hinduism is the older one and hence it has larger spread, larger acceptance. Islam is a new one, Christianity is a new one, less number of proponents there. It seems to be a good one. This same thing I cannot apply to maybe Saudi Arabia, where I have a large amount of Islamic population. Maybe there I can say that Islam is the older one and hence it has a larger spread. Others, Christianity, etc., they are very recent ones and hence I see a lesser. Can you give a opposite of it? You say that no, this is not acceptable in this particular case. That is, older is the culture trait, more is the geographical spread. This cannot be valid in all circumstances. Can you give an exception?
Zionism.
Okay. Okay.
Just Israel. And it's one of the oldest parties.
और बताइए.
Buddhism and Islam in India.
Buddhism and Islam in India. Okay. Buddhism was okay. Buddhism was earlier one. Islam is a later one. But then Islam has more number of proponents in India than Buddhism. And what else? बताइए. Give particular example. Religion तो बाजू में लगाइए और कुछ बताइए. She was actually coming on. हाँ बोलिए. Which one? So if you are seeing the entire globe, it is not that way, but okay. ठीक है, religion का तो ये एक आध हो गया example. What our friend is saying here is that if you are looking at technology, older technologies, though they are old, they are not existing any longer, or there is less of acceptance when compared to the more recent technologies for that matter. Sounds to be a good one, because in the material evolution we see that we do not have maybe the lesser technologies, जैसा कि typewriter हो गया, older one, but almost not existing, only a very few homes might be having when compared to the later other technologies. This one very interesting criticism given by Marvin Harris. I really loved that. If this is acceptable, older is the culture trait, more is the acceptance, if that is the case. He was giving an opposite of it. This is not valid. He says, compare water with Coca-Cola. I think that's the same example you see in the advertisements. Where there is no water, there is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is the new one, water is the older one. But you don't find water everywhere, but Coca-Cola everywhere you will find. I love Harris because he tries to give so many contemporary examples of this kind. Now, this is one principle. They were trying to give us, of course, you can have opportunities to criticize them, but they also help us understand cultural diffusion in particular ways. We were trying to see in the previous class why a new thing is considered to be necessary. Why is it that a culture group accepts a few things? Because you don't like what is going on there, you are looking for something new, or maybe the existing one is disturbing, not so very comfortable to accept and continue with. These are the kind of examinations they tried to make. But then theory wise, if you observe, culture area concept wise, if you observe, we don't see much of a utility. Nevertheless, I would be giving you a certain example, certain studies that went on in India. Upadhyaya and Pandey, he actually has this small topic, culture area studies in India. We would try to give a gist of it, because that is one question that is not asked so far. Maybe possible that you should be, So you can write this in the list of questions to prepare for the upcoming exam. We started to make this list in the last class. I think one question I had given. What was that question I had given? Two questions. Neo-Buddhist movement and Buddhism in Himalayan region. This is the third question you are writing there. Culture area studies in India. Culture area studies in India. All the three we will be either discussing in the class or we will be giving a note to you. Religions we still haven't started. Culture area studies in India. Now, come back, sir. Let's start writing. American School of Diffusionism. American School of Diffusionism. Remember, sir, before American diffusionism and after German Austrian, there was this man, Franz Boas. We'll have to dedicate a full class for him because he's worth one full class. So that we will be doing in tomorrow's class. Now we will finish off writing about American school. Write down. American diffusionism owes its origin to the writings of Franz Boas, who introduced the concept of diffusion to American anthropology. Whistler and Kroeber were the major proponents. Whistler and Kroeber were the major proponents who tried to present diffusion through the concept of culture area. They observed that culture groups residing in close geographical proximity have more cultural similarities than those residing in distant regions, though the two groups might be generally of one kind. You can recall the example of Muslims there. Keep writing. They reasoned this to the diffusion of culture traits. Between closely inhabiting groups. In explaining this phenomena, Whistler introduced Whistler introduced the concept of culture area, which is defined as a geographical region wherein similar culture traits are found. He proposed a methodology of constructing or identifying culture area. That is, number one, dividing the geographical region into different culture areas. Secondly, for each area, a list of culture traits is to be prepared, which have reached that region through the process of diffusion. Thirdly, examining the causes of diffusion. All right, in the next paragraph. Thus, unlike German Austrians, American diffusionists focused at the causes of diffusion. They criticized the idea of degeneration of culture traits that was supported by British and German Austrians. They believed that culture traits get amended or modified based on the requirement of recipient culture group. This shall not be generalized as a degeneration but shall be viewed as adaptation to the new region and culture. Such an idea is the result of Franz Boas ideology of cultural adaptation. Right in the next paragraph. The American diffusionists, according to Marvin Harris, had started with a big bang, but ended with a feeble theory, weak theory. For example, Whistler tried constructing culture areas on the basis of food consumption. He identified 6 basic food areas in North America, later increasing to 8. He believed that if in a geographical region there is a larger similarity in the culture trait of food consumption, the inhabitants of the region are found to be having similar other culture traits. Take that down. Basic food areas, that is the region. Caribou, bison, salmon, wild seeds, maize, intensive agriculture, manioc, and guanaco. ఇందులో ఫుడ్ ఎక్కడ ఉందిరా అని అడగొద్దు. First you take down, then I will show you the pictures. Sometimes you might be wondering how illogical the thinker might be. How is it possible that if I have the same taste, I will have the same culture? Just because you like the same kind of food, you should not decide on getting married. So in the exam, if the concept of culture area is given, it is not necessary that you give the table. I don't think wild seeds, maize, intensive agriculture need any explanation. Those are the other ones. I thought you'd understand what I'm writing, what I'm talking about. Caribou is nothing but the reindeer, largely consumed by Eskimo. I think in the table they must have given Eskimo region. Bison, most of us know. That is guanaco. What's the other name of that? Llamas. Oh. This is manioc, something like a sweet potato. And that is salmon, fish. Must be consuming a lot. Rainy season में ज़्यादा salmon मिलता भी है. Okay, come down. Keep writing. नहीं अभी एक 5 मिनट क्योंकि 10 मिनट देर से स्टार्ट हुआ था क्लास. No, you need to give me that 10 minutes so that I can say that I have finished American Fellows. अब थोड़ा सा. This is only the beginning of the whole thing. जैसे जैसे नो आप हमारे पास आते जाओगे. I'll just wind this up and I'll do Krober later. Whistler defined culture areas within the narrow sphere of food consumption though he made it a primary prerequisite to provide a complete list of culture traits which was examined by Krober and others. Now I leave you there. First 10-15 minutes I will wind up this thing tomorrow. Will you watch one documentary back home? You'll have patience to do that, I'm sure. You also take down your planner. What you have done today, you are only writing, of course. Thank you so much.
If we were able to select the most intelligent, imaginative, energetic, and emotionally stable third.
अच्छा ये आपका homework है, आप देखिए. Biography of Franz Boas. It's a small one, about 8 minutes. Sir, throughout we were actually writing dictation. You have written number 1, German school, British school, and second was German school, and you have started writing American school. Sources, of course, the class notes. Assignment, I haven't given anything, but this is the homework. Biography, Franz Boas. So, कल हमको थोड़ा सा film भी देखना है क्लास में. We will watch a film and we will write down things about Boas. There are many things to talk about him. A big question. Have a good time, sir.